The unexpected teacher. Sarah Chen stifled a yawn as she settled into her seat in the advanced xenobiology lecture hall. 6 months into her exchange program at the Galactic University of Comparative Species Studies, the novelty of being surrounded by beings from 1,000 different worlds had begun to wear thin. The tedium of academic life, it seemed, was truly universal. Professor Zilksnap, a towering insectoid being, clicked and buzzed at the front of the room, its mandibles working furiously as it explained the intricacies of Zolak digestive systems. Sarah's translator earpiece struggled to keep up, occasionally spitting out phrases like quantum-entangled stomach acids and hyperdimensional nutrient absorption. As her attention wandered, Sarah found herself gazing out the reinforced viewports that lined one wall of the lecture hall. The swirling purple nebula beyond never failed to take her breath away, its cosmic dust reminiscent of, "Holy crap, is that snow?" The words escaped her lips before she could stop them. The lecture hall fell silent, save for the wet slop of a startled Mulan dropping its datapad. Every eye, ocular cluster, and sensory organ swiveled towards Sarah. Professor Zilksnap's antennae twitched in irritation. "Miss Chen," it chittered, "while I understand that humans are prone to sudden outbursts, no doubt a vestigial trait from your species' time as prey animals, I must insist that you refrain from interrupting my lecture with nonsensical exclamations." Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from the viewport. "I'm sorry, Professor, but look." As one, the class turned to follow her gaze. Outside the reinforced plexiglass, delicate white flakes were indeed drifting past, accumulating on the station's external structures in a fine powder. "Fascinating," hummed Sarlacc, a crystalline being whose multifaceted body sparkled with interest. "Is this some sort of localized cosmic phenomenon? Perhaps a micrometeor shower of frozen xenon?" "No, you mineralized moron," Grex, a blob-like creature from a high-gravity world, burbled. "It's obviously a malfunction in the station's waste recycling system. We're being showered in processed excrement." The class erupted into a cacophony of confused chatter, clicks, and electromagnetic pulses. Professor Zilksnap's exoskeleton vibrated with frustration as it attempted to regain control of the situation. "Silence," it bellowed, its translator struggling to convey the full multi-tonal range of its command. "Ms. Chen, I demand an explanation for this disruption. What precisely is this snow, and why does it warrant such an emotional response?" Sarah grinned, suddenly feeling like the most interesting specimen in a zoo full of aliens. "Well, Professor, snow is a weather phenomenon from Earth. It's frozen water that falls from the sky in crystalline flakes. Where I'm from, it happens pretty regularly during winter." A tentacled cephalon raised an appendage. "Pardon my ignorance, but water falls from your sky regularly, and you allow this?" Sarah chuckled. "Allow it? We celebrate it. You see, when it snows a lot, sometimes we even get what we call snow days, days when school or work is cancelled because there's too much snow to safely travel." The lecture hall exploded into chaos once more. The very concept seemed to short-circuit the alien students' brains. "Preposterous," screeched Zigzax, an avian quilchin, ruffling its iridescent feathers. "You halt all productive activities due to atmospheric precipitation. How has your species not devolved into primordial sludge?" "Hey now, feather duster," Sarah shot back with a smirk. "I'll have you know that snow days are a cherished tradition. Besides, sometimes you need a break from the grind to have a little fun." Professor Zilksnap's mandibles clacked rapidly, a sign Sarah had come to recognize as the insectoid equivalent of a deep, exasperated sigh. "Miss Chen, while I'm certain your quaint planetary customs are fascinating to you, I fail to see how this relates to our study of advanced xenobiology." Sarah stood up, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Oh, but it does, Professor. What better way to study the adaptability and resilience of different species than by exposing them to a new environmental challenge? I propose we declare an impromptu field trip. Let's go outside and experience snow firsthand. A ripple of excitement pulsed through the alien students, followed quickly by murmurs of apprehension. Outside? Squeaked blowbacks, a timid gaseous entity contained within a shimmering force field. But the station's environmental controls are designed to accommodate a wide range of species requirements. We can't just. Where's your sense of adventure? Sarah interrupted, grinning. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Professor Zilksnap's antennae drooped in what Sarah had come to recognize as the equivalent of a facepalm. I suppose, it chittered reluctantly, but there may be some educational value in this expedition. Very well, class. We shall adjourn to the station's external observation deck, but I expect a full report on your observations and experiences. With a cheer that ranged from high-pitched squeals to subsonic rumbles, the class began to file out of the lecture hall. Sarah found herself at the center of a whirlwind of questions. Will this snow interfere with my crystalline lattice structure? Sarlacc chimed anxiously. Nah, you'll be fine, Sarah assured him. Might even make you sparkle more. Is it true that humans intentionally construct crude effigies out of compacted snow? Inquired Tax, a hive mind composed of thousands of tiny insects. Sarah grinned. Snowmen? Oh yeah, and we give them carrot noses and everything. I'll show you how. As they made their way through the station's winding corridors, Sarah couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Here she was, billions of light years from home, about to introduce a bunch of aliens to one of Earth's simplest pleasures. It was moments like these that made all the homesickness and culture shock worth it. The airlock to the external observation deck hissed open, and a gust of cold air rushed in, carrying with it a flurry of snowflakes. The alien students recoiled instinctively, but Sarah strode forward with her arms outstretched. Come on, you big babies, she laughed, twirling in the falling snow. It won't bite. Cautiously, the aliens began to venture out onto the deck. Their reactions were a comedy of errors and wonder. Galactic stepped out and immediately began to sparkle as snowflakes landed on his crystalline body. Oh my, he chimed in delight. I feel fabulous. Blowback's force field crackled as it adjusted to the new environment, causing the snowflakes to dance and swirl around him in a miniature blizzard. This is most peculiar, he wheezed. My sensory inputs are quite confused. Zigzags, who had earlier been so dismissive, was now hopping from foot to foot, his avian instincts kicking in as he tried to catch snowflakes midair. I retract my previous statement, he squawked between leaps. This is most invigorating. Even Professor Zilksnap, despite its earlier reservations, seemed to be enjoying itself. Its exoskeleton was slowly accumulating a fine layer of snow, giving it the appearance of a sugar-dusted pastry. Fascinating, it chittered. The crystalline structure of these frozen water particles is quite remarkable. Sarah, meanwhile, had already begun gathering snow to build a snowman. All right, class, she called out, her voice filled with laughter. Gather round for your first lesson in snow-based sculpture. As the alien students crowded around, Sarah began to explain the finer points of snowman construction. First, you start with a small snowball and roll it around to make it bigger, like this. She demonstrated, and soon the deck was filled with aliens of all shapes and sizes attempting to roll snowballs. The results were varied, to say the least. Tax, the insectoid hive mind, had divided itself into teams, each group working on a different part of their snowman. The result was a strangely symmetrical creation that looked more like a snow crystal than a traditional snowman. Is this correct, Instructor Sarah? The hive mind buzzed in unison. Sarah bit back a laugh. It's unique. Very artistic. I love the fractals. Blowbacks, still contained within his force field, had managed to create a perfect sphere of snow suspended in midair. I believe I have mastered this technique, he wheezed proudly. That's actually pretty cool, Sarah admitted, impressed despite herself. As the class continued their snowy experiments, Professor Zilksnap oozed over to Sarah. Miss Chen, it chittered, its tone a mixture of reluctant admiration and lingering exasperation. I must admit that this impromptu field trip has proven to be unexpectedly educational. The students seem to be engaging with concepts of environmental adaptation and creative problem-solving in ways I hadn't anticipated. Sarah beamed. See, Professor? Sometimes a little chaos is good for the learning process. And speaking of chaos, Sarah bent down, quickly packed a snowball, and lobbed it gently at the professor's exoskeleton. The snowball exploded in a puff of white powder, leaving Zilksnap's antennae twitching in surprise. Most invigorating, the professor chittered after a moment. Is this another Earth tradition associated with snow? Oh, Professor, Sarah grinned mischievously, you have no idea. Hey, everyone, who wants to learn about snowball fights? The next hour was a blur of flying snow, alien laughter, and the occasional misfired ice projectile. Zigzags, with his natural aerial abilities, proved to be a formidable opponent until Blowbacks discovered he could use his force field to deflect incoming snowballs with pinpoint accuracy. As the impromptu battle raged on, Sarah found herself in an unlikely alliance with Sarlacc, using his reflective surface to blind their opponents with reflected starlight. I must say, Sarah, Sarlacc chimed as they ducked behind a hastily constructed snow fort, I'm beginning to understand the appeal of these snow days. There's a certain joy in this controlled chaos. Sarah grinned, packing another snowball. That's the spirit. Sometimes you need to shake things up a bit, you know. Break out of the routine, experience something new. Indeed, Sarlacc agreed, his crystalline form vibrating with excitement. I believe I shall propose a similar activity for my homeworld. Perhaps we could engineer a harmless crystal storm for recreational purposes. As the battle wound down, the alien students gathered around Sarah, their eyes or equivalent sensory organs shining with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Instructor Sarah, Tax buzzed, its swarm reconfiguring into a vaguely humanoid shape, we have a query. On your world, how frequently do these snow days occur? Sarah chuckled, brushing snow off her uniform. Well, it depends on where you live. Some places get them pretty often during winter, others hardly ever. Zigzags ruffled his feathers thoughtfully. And your educational institutions simply cease operations during these events. Is this not detrimental to your learning process? You think so, Sarah replied with a smirk, but sometimes a break from the routine can be more valuable than another day of lectures. It gives you a chance to experience something new, to adapt to unexpected situations. Sound familiar? The alien students exchanged glances, a wave of understanding passing through the group. Professor Zilksnap stepped forward, its exoskeleton now peppered with tiny icicles. Miss Chen raises an intriguing point, it chittered. Perhaps there is merit in occasionally disrupting our standard curriculum to engage in more experiential learning opportunities. A chorus of excited agreement rippled through the assembled aliens. Very well, Zilksnap continued, its tone one of amused resignation. I propose that we establish a new tradition at the Galactic University of Comparative Species Studies. Once per standard galactic cycle, we shall designate a Terran Snow Day, during which regular classes will be suspended in favor of alternative educational experiences. The observation deck erupted in cheers, the cacophony of alien voices echoing across the snow-covered expanse. As the excitement died down, and the class began to make their way back inside, Sarah hung back for a moment, gazing out at the star-filled expanse beyond the snow-dusted viewport. A lump formed in her throat as a wave of homesickness washed over her. Sarlacc, noticing her hesitation, chimed softly beside her. Are you well, Sarah? You seem less luminous than before. Sarah smiled, wiping away a tear that had begun to freeze on her cheek. Yeah, I'm okay. Just missing home a bit, I guess. But you know what? This helped. Sharing a little piece of Earth with all of you. It made the universe feel a bit smaller, a bit more like home. Sarlacc's crystalline form shimmered in what Sarah had come to recognize as a gesture of empathy. Perhaps that is the true value of these snow days you speak of. They remind us to find joy in the unexpected, to create moments of connection amidst the vast expanse of the cosmos. Sarah nodded, giving the alien a gentle pat on what she assumed was his shoulder. Couldn't have said it better myself, Sarlacc. Now come on, let's go inside before Professor Zilksnap starts worrying about our core temperatures or something. As they made their way back to the airlock, Sarah couldn't help but grin. She'd come to this station to learn about alien life, but somehow she'd ended up teaching a bunch of extraterrestrials about one of humanity's silliest, most beloved traditions. And in the process, she'd learned something too, that no matter how strange or different beings from across the galaxy might seem, there was always room for a little wonder, a little chaos, and a lot of fun. The universe, she decided, had better brace itself. After all, she hadn't even introduced them to water balloon fights yet. The next morning, Sarah woke to find her personal communication device buzzing incessantly. Bleary-eyed, she fumbled for the translucent disc, nearly dropping it as she read the flashing message. ORGNT, all studentes, report to Central ATRUM. Snow day protosios in EFFE seat. Sarah blinked, wondering if she was still dreaming. Surely they hadn't taken her suggestion seriously. But as she made her way through the station's winding corridors, she realized that something extraordinary was indeed happening. The central atrium, usually a hub of studious activity, had been transformed overnight. Holographic projectors filled the cavernous space with swirling snowflakes that felt surprisingly solid when Sarah reached out to touch them. The temperature had been lowered to near freezing, and the floor was covered in a thick layer of something that crunched underfoot like real snow. "Ah, Miss Chen," Professor Zilksnap's voice chittered from behind her. "I trust you approve of our preparations." Sarah turned to find the insectoid professor looking uncharacteristically festive. Its exoskeleton was draped in what appeared to be a garland of miniature icicles, and its antennae bobbed with barely contained excitement. "This is incredible," Sarah managed, still taking in the scene. "But how did you manage all this overnight?" Zilksnap's mandibles clicked in what Sarah had come to recognize as its version of a chuckle. "My dear, you forget that we are a society capable of faster-than-light travel. A little atmospheric manipulation is child's play in comparison. Now, I believe you have some instructing to do." As if on cue, a crowd of alien students began to pour into the atrium, their reactions a mix of wonder, confusion, and barely contained excitement. "Attention, everyone," Sarah called out, stepping onto a raised platform. "Welcome to the first annual Galactic Snow Day. Today, we're going to experience some of Earth's most beloved winter traditions. First up, sledding." She gestured to a series of ramps that had been constructed along one wall of the atrium, each ending in a pile of soft, fluffy pseudo-snow. Beside them stood an assortment of what Sarah could only describe as alien interpretations of sleds. Some were sleek and aerodynamic, while others looked more like repurposed trash can lids. "The concept is simple," Sarah explained. "You sit on the sled, push off from the top of the ramp, and let gravity do the rest. Who wants to go first?" There was a moment of hesitation before Grex. The high-gravity blob oozed forward. "I fail to see the appeal," it burbled skeptically. "On my world, uncontrolled descent is a primary cause of death." Sarah bit back a laugh. "Trust me, Grex. It's fun. Here, I'll show you." She grabbed one of the more normal-looking sleds and climbed to the top of the tallest ramp. With a whoop of joy, she pushed off, zooming down the slope and landing with a soft poof in the pile of artificial snow at the bottom. "See," she called out, grinning from ear to ear. "Perfectly safe." Inspired by Sarah's demonstration, the alien students began to line up for their turn. What followed was a comedy of errors and unexpected adaptations. Sarlacc, the crystalline being, discovered that his faceted body made him naturally aerodynamic. He zipped down the ramp so fast that he had to be caught by a hastily erected force field at the bottom. Blowbacks, still contained within his personal atmosphere bubble, found that he could manipulate his gaseous form to steer his sled with remarkable precision. He soon began performing elaborate aerial tricks, much to the amazement of his classmates. Even Professor Zilksnap got in on the action, using its multiple limbs to construct a bizarre, multi-directional sled that allowed it to slide sideways and even backward down the ramp. As the morning wore on, Sarah introduced more winter activities. Snowman building evolved into a competition to create the most anatomically accurate representation of various alien species. The results ranged from impressively lifelike to hilariously abstract. Ice skating proved to be a particular challenge. The station's artificial gravity could be locally adjusted, leading to a rink where different sections had varying levels of slipperiness. Sarah watched in amusement as her alien classmates attempted to navigate the changing terrain, their natural locomotion methods often proving more of a hindrance than a help. "This is preposterous," Zigzag squawked as he flapped his wings frantically, sliding across a particularly frictionless patch of ice. "How do humans find enjoyment in such a loss of control?" Sarah glided past him, executing a graceful spin. "That's kind of the point, Zix. Sometimes you have to embrace the chaos to find the fun in it." As lunchtime approached, Sarah unveiled her pièce de résistance, hot chocolate. She had spent weeks working with the station's nutritionists and molecular astronomists to create versions that were not only safe for various alien physiologies, but also captured the essence of the comforting Earth beverage. "Okay, everyone," she announced, standing next to a steaming cauldron. "This is a traditional Earth drink for cold days. It's meant to warm you up from the inside out." The aliens approached cautiously, their sensory organs twitching at the unfamiliar aroma. Sarah began ladling out portions into an assortment of containers, each specially designed for different alien anatomies. Sarlacc was the first to try it, dipping one of his crystalline protrusions into the liquid. His entire body immediately lit up with a warm, golden glow. "By the cosmic forces," he chimed, his voice resonating with delight. "It's as if I'm absorbing the very essence of a yellow dwarf star." Encouraged by Sarlacc's reaction, the other aliens began to sample their drinks. The reactions were as varied as the species themselves. Grex's blob-like body rippled with waves of color as it absorbed the hot chocolate. "Fascinating," it burbled. "The chemical composition is causing a most intriguing density fluctuation in my lower hemispheres." Blowbacks, unable to directly consume the liquid, had been given a specially designed aromatherapy version. His gaseous form swirled with new hues as he inhaled the steam. "I believe I'm experiencing what humans call coziness," he wheezed contentedly. Even Professor Zilksnap seemed impressed. "Miss Chen," it chittered, mandibles working overtime to process the drink, "I must commend you on this concoction. It seems to be stimulating my tertiary ganglia in a most pleasant manner." As the aliens enjoyed their hot chocolate, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had brought a little piece of Earth to this distant corner of the galaxy, and in doing so, had bridged a gap between vastly different species. The afternoon brought new challenges and adventures. Sarah introduced the concept of winter sports, which led to some rather creative interpretations. An impromptu curling tournament broke out, with teams using everything from crystalline formations to small anti-gravity devices as stones. The Cephalon team proved particularly adept, their tentacles allowing for precise control and last-second trajectory adjustments. Ski jumping took on a whole new dimension when several of the flying species decided that the ramps were merely suggestions. Sarah watched in awe as Zigzags and his avian classmates engaged in aerial acrobatics that would put Earth's most daring athletes to shame. But it was the snowball fight that truly brought everyone together. Sarah had barely finished explaining the concept when the atrium erupted into a frenzy of flying snow and laughter. Alliances formed and dissolved in moments. Sarlacc used his reflective surfaces to create dazzling distractions, while Blawbax discovered he could manipulate his force field to catch and redirect incoming snowballs. Even Professor Zooksnap got into the spirit, using its multiple limbs to unleash a barrage of perfectly formed snowballs with machine-like precision. I must admit, Ms. Chen, it chittered between volleys. There is a certain strategic element to this activity that I find quite engaging. As the day began to wind down, Sarah gathered everyone for one final Earth tradition, making snow angels. The concept proved challenging for some of the more unusually shaped aliens, but the results were both beautiful and hilarious. Greg's attempt resulted in what looked like an abstract blob-shaped crater, while the Cephalon team created an intricate pattern of overlapping tentacle imprints that resembled a snowflake itself. Sarah flopped down in the snow beside Sarlacc, who was attempting to create a snow crystal by carefully rearranging his facets. As she moved her arms and legs to form her angel, she couldn't help but laugh at the sheer absurdity and joy of the moment. "You know," Sarlacc chimed thoughtfully, "I believe I understand now why your species values these snow days so highly. It's not just about the activities themselves, is it?" Sarah sat up, brushing snow from her hair. "What do you mean?" Sarlacc's crystalline form shimmered as he formulated his thoughts. "Throughout this day, I've observed our classmates engaging in behaviors that would be considered highly irregular, even dangerous, on their home worlds. Yet here, in this artificial winter wonderland, they've found common ground. They've laughed together, struggled together, and created something beautiful." Sarah nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "Yeah, that's exactly it, Sarlacc. Snow days back on Earth, they're not just about getting a day off school or work. They're about community, about shared experiences. They remind us that even in the coldest, darkest times, we can find warmth in each other." As the day's festivities came to a close, Professor Zilksnap called for everyone's attention. "Students, faculty, esteemed guests," it began, its voice carrying a warmth that Sarah had never heard before. "Today has been an enlightening experience for us all. Ms. Chen's Snow Day has demonstrated that there is much we can learn from embracing a bit of controlled chaos in our curriculum." The professor's antennae twitched in what Sarah now recognized as barely contained excitement. "Therefore, I am pleased to announce that the Galactic University of Comparative Species Studies will be implementing a new course next semester. Adaptive Recreation and Cultural Exchange, the Human Perspective. Ms. Chen, we would be honored if you would consider co-teaching this course." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Me? But I'm just a student." Zilksnap's mandibles clicked in amusement. "My dear, I think we can all agree that you've taught us more about adaptability and creative problem-solving today than many of our tenured professors have in years." Besides, it added with a chittering chuckle, "I suspect it will be easier to keep an eye on your, let's call them extracurricular activities, if they're officially sanctioned." As the announcement was met with cheers and various alien approximations of applause, Sarah felt her face flush with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. She'd come to this station as an outsider, a curiosity from a death world that most of her classmates couldn't even imagine surviving on. But now somehow, she'd become a bridge, not just between species, but between the rigid structure of academic life and the chaotic joy of human-style problem-solving. Later that evening, as the cleanup crews began the task of returning the atrium to its normal state, Sarah found herself once again gazing out at the star-filled expanse beyond the station's viewports. But this time, the ache of homesickness was replaced by a warm glow of accomplishment and connection. A soft chime beside her announced Sarlacc's presence. "Credit for your thoughts." The crystalline being hummed. Sarah smiled. "Just thinking about how much has changed since yesterday. I came here to learn about alien life, but somehow I ended up teaching a bunch of extraterrestrials about one of humanity's silliest, most beloved traditions." "And in doing so," Sarlacc added, his facets twinkling, "you've taught us something far more valuable. You've shown us that there's strength in embracing the unexpected, joy in shared experiences, and wisdom in a little bit of chaos." Sarah nodded, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. Well said, my crystalline friend. And just wait until they hear about water balloon fights. As Sarah and Sarlacc laughed together, their voices joining the lingering echoes of the day's festivities, the stars beyond seemed to twinkle just a bit brighter. In this small corner of the vast, indifferent universe, a new understanding had blossomed. One snowball, one shared laugh, one moment of unexpected joy at a time. When humans taught aliens about snow days, Part 2, the Galactic Snow Day. News of the impromptu snow day spread through the Galactic University of Comparative Species Studies like wildfire, or perhaps more accurately, like a particularly aggressive strain of self-replicating nanobots. Within days, Sarah Chen found herself at the center of a whirlwind of attention, bombarded with questions from curious aliens of all shapes, sizes, and states of matter. Is it true that humans willingly encase themselves in layers of insulating fabric to frolic in frozen precipitation? Asked a gelatinous Blobbian professor, its translucent body rippling with curiosity. Sarah grinned, adjusting her translator earpiece. You mean winter clothes? Yeah, we call it bundling up. It's part of the fun. Fascinating, the professor burbled. And this bundling does not impede your motor functions or sensory input. Well, sometimes you waddle a bit, Sarah admitted with a laugh, but that's half the charm. As the days passed, Sarah noticed a shift in the atmosphere of the station. The normally staid and serious academic environment was buzzing with an energy she hadn't felt since her arrival. Even the most studious aliens seemed to have caught snow fever, as Sarah had begun to call it. It was during a late-night study session in the xenobiology lab that inspiration struck. Sarah looked up from her holographic textbook, her eyes wide with excitement. Guys, she said to her study group, which included Sarlacc the crystalline being, Zix-Zax the avian quilxion, and Blorbax the gaseous entity, I have an idea. Sarlacc's facets shimmered with interest. Does it involve more of your delightful Earth chaos, Sarah? Oh yeah, Sarah grinned. How would you feel about organizing a station-wide galactic snow day? The aliens exchanged glances, a mixture of excitement and apprehension rippling through the group. But Sarah, Blorbax wheezed, his gaseous form swirling anxiously within his containment field. We can't actually make it snow throughout the station. The environmental systems. Who says we need real snow? Sarah interrupted, her eyes twinkling with mischief. We're in a space station filled with the brightest minds in the galaxy. I bet we could come up with some amazing snow alternatives. And so began Operation Galactic Snowfall. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and her growing band of enthusiastic aliens worked tirelessly to bring a taste of Earth winter to the space station. Sarlacc and a team of engineering students developed a harmless crystalline substance that mimicked the properties of snow, sparkling beautifully under the station's artificial lights. Zix-Zax, putting his aerodynamic expertise to use, designed a series of gravity-manipulating devices to make the Fork's snowflakes float and swirl realistically. Even Blorbax contributed, using his understanding of gaseous physics to create pockets of cooled air throughout the station, giving participants the full chilly experience of a snow day. As word of their project spread, more and more aliens joined in. A group of fungoid exchange students from a dense jungle world offered to create edible snow treats, while a team of aquarium professors eagerly volunteered to oversee ice sculpture competitions using rapidly solidifying protein gels. The day of the event arrived, and Sarah could hardly contain her excitement as she stood on a hovering platform in the station's main atrium. Thousands of aliens from every corner of the galaxy had gathered, their anticipation palpable. Welcome, everyone, to the first annual Galactic Snow Day. Sarah's amplified voice echoed through the cavernous space. Today, we celebrate the spirit of adaptation, creativity, and joy that unites all sentient beings. Let the festivities begin. With a dramatic flourish, Sarah activated the snowfall simulators. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as shimmering crystals began to float down from the ceiling, swirling in mesmerizing patterns thanks to zigzags as gravity manipulators. What followed was a day of chaotic, joyous experimentation as aliens of all kinds experienced snow for the first time. In one corner of the atrium, a group of silicon-based lifeforms were attempting to construct a snowman, their crystalline appendages clinking musically as they stacked perfectly geometrical snowballs. No, Sarah laughed, rushing over to help. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it's better if it's a little lopsided. Gives it character. The silicon beings tilted their faceted heads in confusion, but gamely followed her instructions, resulting in a charmingly wonky snow sculpture that looked more like an abstract art piece than a traditional snowman. Meanwhile, a team of energoid beings, pure energy contained within specialized suits, had taken to the ski slopes, a series of frictionless ramps set up in another part of the station. Their natural glow left trails of light as they zoomed down the slopes, creating a dazzling light show.